This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Cassidy, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Man, the NBA playoffs is just at an all-time high right now. I know everybody is all mad because the Cleveland Cavaliers knocked out the Hawks in 4. But are we not watching what's happening in the Western Conference? Are we not watching what's happening between the Raptors and the Heat? Come on, man. This is NBA playoff basketball. Teams are gearing up. The MVP was not playing. I mean, listen, there's so many storylines to be written. We might have to get some of these Hollywood screenplay writers to draw up a better movie for us by the time that this season ends. But I'd rather have my partner in crime. I call him my Russo brother from another mother. My man, 50 Grand, writer for one of the illest websites, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna and PNC. My brother, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Do you agree with me, Mr. Shaw, that this NBA playoffs is actually a little bit more intriguing than what the scorecards reveal?
Absolutely, man. Salute to you. Salute to all the fans listed on the baseline. And salute to the NBA playoffs in general for picking up the pace a little bit. Yeah, we've seen some ugly basketball. We've seen some things going on with referees. But more importantly, we've seen some competitive matchups in terms of the series being relatively close outside of Cleveland doing their thing against the Atlanta Hawks. So that said, I'm glad that we're here back on the NBA baseline to discuss the NBA playoffs, coaching things, coaching savagery as we're going to get into, and a great special guest, which I know you're going to introduce to the folks right now.
Oh, listen, man, I am very stoked about having this guest on with us. Shaw and myself, we definitely consider this one of our bigger guests that we've had in a while. Cassidy Hubbarth from ESPN's NBA Tonight and NBA Coast to Coast. She's going to be hopping on with us for a few moments to help talk about the NBA playoffs and this thing that we got going, Shaw. I think it may be trending, coaching savagery that's happening around in the NBA. Really a phenomenal girl, a phenomenal woman doing her thing. And she's going to be holding it down for us for a little bit as we talk about the NBA playoffs and other topics. And then also in our segment of The Drop, we talk about the Atlanta Hawks as they have been exited out of the playoffs. So you know it's us for our coveted On Git segment in The Drop. And then, of course, Coast to Coast, where we keep you abreast of everything happening in the association. We have a wonderful show for you and yours. And of course, listen, man, we do it for y'all because y'all listen to us. And we love nothing more than to provide you with quality guests and quality topics of conversation here on the Baseline NBA podcast. We appreciate everyone continually joining in, listening, tuning on. You know how to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA or get at me at GameFace Lee. But we always encourage you to get at the show's Twitter handle at NBA_the Baseline. Hashtag up the baseline. Let us know who you are or what you're about. We're available on all the major platforms, available on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Microsoft TuneIn, and Player FM. So we always encourage you to download any one of these platforms and allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things NBA. You know how we do, and you know how we like to set it off. It is time now for the breakdown. Time to break it down. Time now for the breakdown. Cassidy, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. And we have a really great guest, special guest on with us. And what better way really to get into the digs of the NBA playoffs than having one of the premier hosts who covers the NBA on ESPN, Cassidy Hubbarth, live and direct. Cassidy, thank you so much for joining on with us this week so we can talk about the NBA playoffs.
Oh, man, it is my pleasure, and I wish you could come around with me every day. That was a heck of an intro. I feel good about myself. Let's do this.
Appreciate it. So, Cassidy, we're not even going to waste any time. Let's get right into it because there's so much happening right now in the NBA, especially with the playoffs, right, specifically. And it's just interesting. I want to know what is your take so far? You know, a lot of people have talked about how bad the first round is, but now we're seeing it start to pick up a little bit with the Warriors and the Trailblazers, the Thunder, and with the Spurs. What's your overall take so far with this year's NBA playoffs in comparison to what we had from last year's?
Compared to last year's, well. I just think the storylines are really, really intriguing this year, given the pressure on the Warriors and their historic season. So all eyes are on the Warriors, but because of Steph's injury, and he's been, not in the forefront for the last 2 weeks, we've had a couple moments where we've had other teams kind of steal the spotlight, with the Cavs really, getting into a good feeling right now. I think they're really hitting their stride rather at this point. People remembering that LeBron is still a bad man. The Spurs and Thunder, I still think that series is going to go 7. So I think for a while, like, we were like, okay, well, not forgetting about the Warriors, but they weren't the headline like they were all regular season. And now after that performance by Steph, in overtime in Game 4, it's back to the Warriors. So I think it's really interesting to just see what happens, obviously in the Western Conference Finals, and then I don't see the Raptors or Heat, competing with the Cavs. So the finals is just going to be interesting, because I want to see if the Cavs can keep up their 3-point shooting, if that's sustainable, because that has been, aside from Curry's performance in overtime, the way that the Cavs have been playing, I think, has been the most impressive thing of these playoffs.
You were there, you're talking a lot about the great things that we've seen in the NBA playoffs, but here I'm coming, with the downtrodden news here, and I do want to get your opinion on this, especially as a media type and someone who has access to that. Maybe some of our fans and listeners don't have. Listen, refereeing has been such a focal point of these playoffs, and so many missed calls, bad calls. What is your take on what's been going on with that? And, again, any insight you could provide from us, from your perspective, covering these guys and covering the league, even from a more professional standpoint.
I mean, it's interesting because, I'm not watching the game because of the refs. I don't want to be talking about the refs. I want to talk about the players. But at the same time, every former player that I speak, that I work with, the analysts, they like the fact that the mistakes are put on Front Street, because so much of the mistakes in the past it just goes on the players. And so, for when refs kind of determine the outcome of the game and then can just walk away scot-free, that's irked players in the past. But then again, you have this conversation afterwards, like, okay, well, all right, you admitted that it was a mistake, but then how does that change anything? Now you're just kind of like left with, spilled milk, and you're just not even trying to clean it up. It's just, it's a really complicated situation, but I like the 2-minute reports, but I don't want it to take over the game. Like, I don't think it's a better product with all the replays, and I don't think it's necessarily helping the game, but I don't want to see it go away. I like the new trend of it. So I'm not really sure how I feel about it yet. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the finals play out, because that's actually the ultimate crown on the line there. And if there's a mistakes like we saw in that Spurs Thunder game happening in the finals, then I think Adam Silver will be forced to do something more than just put out a report. There has to be some sort of punishment, because people love to pull out the pitchforks, especially on Twitter.
ESPN Cassidy Hubbarth joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast, host of the NBA Tonight and NBA Coast to Coast. Cassidy, is interesting because myself and Shaw, we were talking about this off, before we had you on, with reference to what happened to Sean Livingston and him, completely blowing up. And I said, I have my thing, which I call conspiracy theories. I personally believe that Steph Curry and Sean Livingston had a conversation before the game. And he's like, listen, help me help you get you on the basketball court, Steph. What do I got to do to get you more than 25 minutes and minutes restrictions? He's like, I think I'm just going to get tossed out of a basketball game, one of the most mild-mannered players, in the NBA to get tossed. But I to your point, and also to what Shaw's point is that I think it does bring to light a little bit about what's happening here with the referees and a lot of these missed calls, because, ESPN, TNT, they're showing the angles, every conceivable angle, and players are getting knocked upside their head like they stole something from their moms, and nothing is being called. And this is what happens. You have a player like Sean Livingston just go ballistic because he's getting hit upside the head going to the basket, and we're not calling them as flagrants, we're not calling them as fouls, but then we're throwing them out of the game because they're expressing their frustrations.
Yeah, Scott Foster was in his feelings. I mean, he was so extra on that ejection. And it's so funny you bring up the fact that, like, Livingston and Steph probably had a conversation. Like, that was storybook. I mean, because he looked so rusty in that first half. And then, he was only supposed to play around 18, 20 minutes, but then Livingston's ejected. And so, oh, my gosh, cue the music. He comes back with a fury and has an unbelievable performance, one of the greatest performances in playoff history. And I don't even think I'm a prisoner of a moment by saying that, because it just was unreal to watch that development just through the whole game. And the ejection was just added that intrigue. Oh no, now Steph has to start the second half. So that's really funny. But like, I don't know. I mean, hard fouls have always been something that the playoffs are about. And I just think we're noticing the outcry more because there's so many people who can voice that frustration about calls. I just don't want it to become about referees. Like, I don't really want to know Scott Foster's name. You know what I'm saying? But I do, because I am seeing his like emotional ejection over and over again and became a storyline. But at the same time, like, I think, it's just fair to have everything reported. I just don't want to see a situation in the future where it becomes like replay is taking over the game, because I think human error is what also adds to the imperfect perfection of the game.
Yeah.
It's fun when when you can, get upset about a mistake that was made and you can't do anything about it, because that's real life.
No, I think that's an excellent point. Definitely adds that authenticity that you need in sports in general. And again, it gives us something to just talk about and debate and like, oh man, you lead this. But like you said, if it does happen on that grand stage in the NBA Finals, yeah, Adam Silver's going to have some explaining to do. But, we're going to go ahead and transition from that specific topic in the playoffs. And some things that we've been talking about on our show, and I wanted to get your perspective from, is, have you ever seen a year, because we've seen a lot of teams kind of discarded now that they're out of the playoffs. You look at the Dallas Mavericks, the Memphis Grizzlies, Atlanta Hawks, et cetera, even go back to the first round. Like I'm saying, a lot of these teams are in a transition now where they really may have to reassess what they're doing. You see a lot of times playoff teams, okay, they got the playoffs, they just need to add a piece or such and such and such. But Memphis, Atlanta, Dallas, even the Clippers to some degree, these are teams that might need to have a fundamental change in terms of their philosophies and rosters, because they're kind of doing the exact same thing every year and having the exact same result. Where do you stand on that? Or is that a trend that you've even noticed with some of these teams that have been exited from the playoffs thus far?
I mean, we don't even have to look at the teams who've been exited. Why don't you just look at the Raptors? I mean, what happened with DeMar DeRozan when he was pretty much benched in that fourth quarter, especially when Lowry had 5 fouls, and it was pretty inevitable that he was going to foul out. I mean, yes, I know he was ice cold. I mean, he was frozen, but this is a guy you just paid big money to and who has a player option. Yeah. And you're basically sending him a message that, like, you can't trust him. And and then you give Corey Joseph the final shot. I don't know. We saw that also with the Hawks and Teague on the bench during the fourth quarter, and Schroeder getting the big minutes, and Trust with the ball down the stretch against the Cavs in that game 4. I mean, there are basically decisions being made before our eyes during these playoffs. So, what's great is that it means that the league's in a healthy place, because it's all these good teams who are consistently good are needing to continue to improve, because you have the strength at the top is so strong that you can't be mediocre. Like you need to continue to push and find something special. It's hard though, because we live in such a "what have you done for me lately?" So you can venture into a really dangerous zone if you keep trying to search for that special something, and then you don't cultivate what you have. That Raptors Heat series has been so ugly. It's been damn near hard to watch. And a big reason is that the Raptors' body language has been just, it's been ugly. Like Lowry and DeRozan, I know they've been cold and they have the pressure of the city on them, but it almost seems like, I know it's 2-2, but it seems like the Heat just, they're not playing that well either, but they have a way more passion than the Raptors, in my opinion.
ESPN Cassidy Hubbarth joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast. Be sure to check her out on NBA Tonight, ESPN, ESPN2, and NBA Coast to Coast. And, Cassidy, it's perfect. I don't know if you were telepathically jumping in our minds, because we are now going to transition ourselves into talking about the coaching aspects of things. And what Shaw alluded to very nicely is what we call coaching savagery right now, because every coach's position is really not safe. I don't care how successful you are. I think there's only maybe two coaches right now that can honestly say they can dictate their own destiny with their coaching. And I mean, we've clearly seen it, the recent situation with Coach Dave Yeager and the Memphis Grizzlies, and now he has transitioned himself to being the head coach for the Sacramento Kings. Have you seen such turmoil like this? I mean, I've seen turmoil, and we talk about, Black Friday, Black Monday in the NFL, and MLB's had its fair share of, craziness with the managerial positions. But in the last 5 years, I really have not seen as much turnover as I have seen than in the coaching position of the NBA. And I think this was so indicative and so primal in what we saw so far in the last 3 weeks. I think since the beginning of the playoffs, the end of the regular season, the craziness that has happened with the coaching carousel.
Yeah, I mean, there's no patience anymore. And I don't think there's ever going to be another Popovich, where, a coach is allowed to kind of grow with their team and just given just the ultimate respect. I just don't see that happening, because there's really nobody on his level as far as tenure is concerned. And so when you have all of these young coaches or coaches just kind of being recycled, there's it's almost like their rep is tarnished in a way. And so there's so much disrespect like across the league and how players are viewing coaches. And I don't know it's coming from it's interesting what's happening in Cleveland. I actually think Ty Lue's been doing a really good job, but what LeBron kind of did there almost diminished the head coaching position, because he was running everything, and he almost made it seem like, all right, well, the star player runs the team. I just think, as I mentioned before, it's what have you done for me lately? There's so much outrage and the ability for people to voice their outrage. And I think there's no stability. No one wants any patience. No one has any patience anymore. As far as Dave Yeager, that goes for him as well. I mean, the reports are he wanted out. He was searching for other jobs. I mean, he got fired for that. He didn't get fired because he, brought my mom, and our next door neighbor to the playoffs, and what he did with that team, and the Grizzlies were the most unlucky team all season, even more so than the Pelicans. But he got fired for creeping, basically, and looking elsewhere. And obviously that situation is really bad, because if you're going to leave the Grizzlies to join what's happening with the Sacramento Kings and DeMarcus Cousins, who doesn't want to be coached by anybody, and you have also Ron Adive and Vlade, who I don't know what they're doing half the time. There's got to be a situation. The Grizzlies situation has got to be pretty tough to deal with for Yeager there. So I don't know. I think there's just both with coaches and with front offices, there's just no more patience. And then I think also the personalities of the players. It's we had Brian Shaw with us like a month or so back, and it's been on record he had a hard time relating to millennials. It's a different locker room these days, and so you really need to know how to deal with personalities. So I think the personalities of the players, they're really strong in the NBA right now. So if you don't know what you're doing, and if you don't know how to communicate well, your lifespan's short in the NBA these days.
Well, there are definitely some coaches out there who are also going to be trying to creeping, as you said, looking for their next position. So which of these coaches that are out there, whose name would you put some respect on, to get a head coaching job, of the guys that are still out there, David Blast or Hornacek and guys like that, whose name sticks out to you? Obviously Frank Vogel as well. Whose name sticks out to you the most?
Well, Frank Vogel. I mean, he should have a head coaching job. I mean, like what they did this year in Indy, and Paul George coming back from the horrific injury, and they changed up their offense. I mean, I think they performed exactly how I expected them to perform. I don't think they underachieved. Sure, they could have done a little bit more, but Frank Vogel has been nothing but successful with a lot of challenges thrown at him. So I think he should definitely have a head coaching job sooner rather than later. I also think that Jeff Hornacek was dealt a raw deal, and I think the front office really just threw him nothing to work with, and they really the whole situation with Isaiah and Dragic and the 3-point guards, Bledsoe, and then trading everybody, and the Marquise Morris situation. Like, all the issues that happened with the Suns were not his fault. So I think he was kind of dealt a raw deal, and he really, when he did have an actual talented squad that was cohesive, they were really good and coached really well. So I think that he deserves another chance as well. As far as some other head coaching names, I wouldn't mind seeing Jeff Van Gundy back on the sidelines, and there's a lot of interesting names out there for sure.
Cassidy, and really to kind of cap the point where we're talking about with where the coaching position is, I feel like guys like Tom Thibodeau, guys like Stan Van Gundy are rearranging where they feel their empowerment needs to be for them to maintain their tenure as being head coaches, specifically in that, especially Doc Rivers, because I think he's pretty much like the trendsetter of this over the last couple of years, where they feel like they need to have empowerment in basketball operations, whether they're president of basketball operations, vice president of basketball operations, somehow, some way, there has to be some kind of added part to their responsibilities that gets them through that door, so to speak, where they don't feel like they're kind of with closed ears, not hearing what's really going on and where management sees them from a head coaching perspective. Do you think that that's what's going to need to happen for that respectability factor, that Birdman factor, to be added now for these head coaches to be taken seriously, and how important they are to helping teams become successful and the organizations as well, too?
Well, I don't know, because I think Stan and Doc are two good examples, because, Doc is a great coach, but as we're seeing, he's a very questionable GM. Stan, so far, he's been pretty good at both jobs. It comes down to how far do you want this? Like, if you really want a guy, how much power do you want to give them? Because anyone, who is hungry is going to want as much control as possible. So, if you're an established name, you're going to ask for everything. Like, that's just like negotiating 101. So you don't have to, answer to anybody other than, the owner. So, and you want to be able to control your team from all aspects. But I just don't think that everyone is cut out for that. We're seeing with the Clippers, there's a lot to have to worry about just with coaching that many stars. Then having to assemble that team on top of that. There are GMs. The GM role is hard by itself. So I think it takes this special person to be able to do both jobs well at the same time. And I can't think of anyone who's really excelled at that yet.
All right, Cassidy, we're going to take the foot off the throttle here a little bit. We've been going, hyper speed here, warp speed, talking about the playoffs and the coaching carousel and the coaching savagery that's taking place. But let's find out a little bit about you, Cassidy. What's one of some of the greatest moments for you working at ESPN with some of the different players and analysts that you've had to come across, and also would like to know who are some of your influences coming up as you've worked in the industry for a little while now.
Oh, so I've been at ESPN for 6 years, and my career has been really unique in the sense that I started as a digital anchor here covering college football, and I've kind of within ESPN, it's obviously, as everyone knows, it's a big company, but even in the production side of things, there are several layers. There's the way that it worked when I started here is that there was like digital media into, the different types of ESPNs, like ESPN News, ESPN2, ESPN, there's a hierarchy. And so it has been a long journey to, get to a place where the executives here trusted me enough to do things like host, the halftimes for our NBA games, out in LA, or do sidelines on Christmas Day, or even host our ABC college football wrap show during the college football season. So those are a couple things that I take pride in that I've done up until this point in my career, because I know where I started even before I got here. Because I came out of school when this business was really changing, when digital media became more prevalent, and people were getting away from their television screens and onto their computer screens or their mobile phones. And instead of going to like Market 175 and, being a sports broadcaster and a local news station, I started in digital media and gained a lot of experience understanding how social media is impacting sports broadcasting, and have kind of really leaned on that knowledge and experience to kind of get where I am today. So as far as people who have influenced me, I have a big production background. Before I was at ESPN, I was also a producer at several different networks. And so I have a lot of producers who have been my mentors, but my biggest on-air mentor was the late, great Stu Scott. And he was not only a very dear friend, but honestly, I still think of him as the best in the business even today. And I strive to be as professional and kind and just full of passion for my work as he was. His battle with cancer was a long and grueling battle, and I would see him before he would go on to SportsCenter just in so much pain that as soon as that light bulb turned red, he was fully committed to entertaining and expressing his passion for what he loved doing, and that was reporting sports. And he not only was he so engaged with the viewers, but also the people around him. He was always so kind to the crew and the PAs. And so I always try to remind myself, like, stay humble, because if Stuart Scott was that humble, and he was pretty much the golden standard of sports broadcasting in my mind, there's no reason I can't be. So he is tremendous, and I think of him often.
Cassidy, before we let you go, and thank you very much. I mean, for our listeners as well, too, it's not often we have an opportunity to speak with someone who is able to open up and really talk about people that we really respect. Like one of the people I always am admired and had the utmost respect for was Stuart Scott. He was one of the people that, in my lifetime, I hoped I'd had the opportunity to even just sit down and have like a 5-minute conversation. Cause I know, he pretty much would just open up my mind completely. But one of the things that I find phenomenal is really the flux and the emergence of women and their placement in being able to cover sports the way that they are. And yourself, Kara Lawson, Doris Burke, you guys have done such a phenomenal job forging ahead and really helping to break the barriers. Nowadays, when we listen to the coverages of any major sport, we're not thinking about genders like we used to. We don't, buy into the idea that, we have to put a woman up in front of the camera or, do it simply just to get more men to pay attention or to get more females interested. The knowledge that you guys are putting out there really helps to shed the barriers, and you're doing it on the biggest stage, obviously, which is ESPN. And I just wanted to get your perspective from you of how you see that, like how important is that for you to continue to keep bucking the trend and to continuing to move forward, because what you guys do and what you do specifically is absolutely phenomenal. And we have the utmost respect for how you cover the NBA and the way that you lay it out, man. It continues to keep making the NBA such a fabulous product for us from the media perspective.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate those words. I mean, like, not to sound like a company gal, but we owe it all to really ESPN for giving us the opportunity, because, ignorance is just a lack of exposure to something. I just think when people are critical of women being on television reporting, sports, is because they probably haven't been exposed to, enough women, and their knowledge. And I just think that that's becoming such a rarity, in sports broadcasting now. It's just, someone like Doris Burke. I mean, I don't think there's anyone who I have a bigger girl crush on than Doris Burke, because she is just so smart, and the way that she knows the game and her passion and her delivery, it's just so fun to watch. And I think that's another big thing, is that you mentioned Kara, Doris, Sage, Rachel, Jamel. We're all very close and support each other. And I think that type of bond as well helps, it helps viewers and listeners kind of trust us a little more, because we are, we are confident because of the support we're getting, not only from ESPN, but from each other. And I think confidence on air is key. If you are confident in your delivery, then the viewers will trust you. It's like, fake it till you make it. Like, if you're confident in yourself, then viewers are going to want to watch you. If you're having fun, viewers are going to want to watch you. And so it doesn't matter if you're black, white, male, female, as long as you're passionate about what you're doing, then you're going to be enjoyable to watch. I mean, compare it to, like, my favorite player in the NBA is Russell Westbrook, because I don't think there's anyone more passionate about playing the game of basketball than he is. And it's just so fun to watch, because you love watching people in their element, enjoying what they do. And I think with a handful of women here, in the women specifically covering the NBA, just love this league so much. And I think Kara, Doris, Rachel, I think we express that on air, and hopefully that's the reason why people are taking to us.
Well, thank you so much, Cassidy, for going ahead and sharing those that insight with us. We have both had some experience in the locker room, and I can honestly say to the detriment of the industry at some points too. Sometimes you see when leaders in the locker room, or they're asking questions, that people are getting snickered at and things like that, and it's really frustrating to watch, because I think we all want to see people treated as equals. And like you said, it doesn't matter what race, creed, gender, it doesn't matter at all. We want to see people doing their thing and having fun doing it. And you definitely represent that for us. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to make sure we got somebody like you, especially you, on our show, because you do exude exactly what we're looking for and what our fans and our listeners are listening for, in terms of having that passion for the NBA, but more importantly, even being able to speak on bigger and larger issues like that, where, like I said, it is about ignorance, and hopefully, people will start to understand that everybody has an opinion and everybody's opinion should be heard. It doesn't matter, again, where you're coming from, black, white, gender, female, whatever, it doesn't matter. And we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us on this week's show. So thank you again from both of us, and hopefully you'll be able to join us again soon.
Of course. It was such a pleasure. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the playoffs, and anytime I'd love to join your podcast.
Thanks again so much, Cassidy. And one final question, because this one has been bugging me before we let you go.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to give kudos to the ESPN production team and how they set this up, man. But there's no possible way that you're going to be sitting eye level with Brad Daugherty. So how far down do they lower this man's seat so he is basically eye level with you, man? Listen. I know there's special effects that we see from Captain America, Civil War, blow your mind, Star Wars, but the real special effects is getting Brad Daugherty to be eye level with Cassidy Hubbarth, okay?
Look, those seats go up and down, so it's like, I move my chair up a little, and he's mostly legs, and so his knees are up to his chest, but our torsos are similar height, so. Yeah, magic of television. You can't know all the secrets.
Awesome. Cassidy, thanks so much once again for joining us here, and we definitely looking forward to bring you back on. Thanks so much again.
Of course, guys. Thank you.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and this was The Breakdown. Time now for The Drop. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. And of course, it's the NBA playoffs as teams continually are getting knocked off the shelf. Another team has fallen on its sword. So you know what that means. It's time for the Atlanta Hawks to just go on and get. And Shaw, when we wrap up this season, I know people are going to look at this and say, wow, just another season where the Atlanta Hawks fall short. I don't know how you fall short because, I think we all collectively agree that this team, would not be able to match up and better a team built like the Cleveland Cavaliers. So it was just an unfortunate circumstance to see them have to run into the Cavaliers, in the second round of the playoffs. But given what we predicted about this Hawks team, the fact that they lost Amari Carroll at the beginning of the season, we didn't anticipate this being an upper echelon basketball team that really, on the second half of the season and going into the playoffs, really played some remarkable basketball.
They really acquitted themselves very well for a team that a lot of people doubted going into this season in terms of being able to have the same level of success. And yeah, they didn't get 60 wins this year. Amassed 48 and were obviously a 4 seed with home court advantage. But they took a little bit of a step back, I think, as many expected, but maybe not as far back as maybe even I would have predicted for this team. They had a very good season. They ran into a buzzsaw in the Cleveland Cavaliers, who historically shot the three ball better than any team in playoff history. In that series against them, 100 plus threes was 4 games. It's or whatever it was, 75 threes. It's just insane. And it's hard to come from. But now we have to figure out what this Atlanta Hawks team is going to do moving forward, as they have a lot of questions, a lot of free agents on this roster, all starting with Al Horford. But there's also some questions whether Jeff Teague will be back. So Coach Bud and that organization, remember Coach Bud is now in a more of a management role too, as well as coach. They have a lot to decide over the summer.
Shaw, and you brought up some really excellent points when we're talking about what the future may hold for this Atlanta Hawks team. I think the first thing that we want to try and address is what should Budenholzer do with reference to the backcourt. I think that we've all been long saying that one of two things really needs to happen. Budenholzer just needs to go ahead and put Dennis Schroeder in there as the starter. I think that somehow he feels like this is his time. He should be ready to do this. And then he pulls the reins back because we see flashes of brilliance from Jeff Teague. And we've seen it. Sometimes players just need a different location, needs to be in a different setting where we could see the best of his game flourish. And I think that's what needs to happen with Jeff Teague and the Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah, you could be right. As I've said many times on this show, I'm just not a Jeff Teague guy. Maybe I will become one if he's on another team and he shows the consistency that he can be at an all-star level time point guard. Because I think talent-wise, it's there. It's just he doesn't seem supremely motivated at all times. In the NBA season, we'll see what happens with that, because that's something that they obviously looked into in terms of exploratory talks of trading Jeff Teague over the course of this past season. Will they revisit that and then give Schroeder the opportunity to be the starting point guard? And he definitely wants that, which, again, is going to cause some friction for this team moving forward. The biggest key right now is still going to be Al Horford. This team had 71 plus million in committed payroll last year, only 21st in terms of how much money they paid out. But they only have 52 million in committed salary going into next season as of right now. And that's obviously going to change, especially with escalating cap and things like that. But Horford is going to be due for a raise. Millsap is going to be making $20 million a year next year. You got to figure Horford is going to be looking for the same thing, that quote unquote max deal, that max contract. They also have Mike Scott with a team option. Kirk Heinrich Bazemore, who was immense for them. He's played himself into some money. This guy was making $2 million a year last year, or this past season, I should say. So he's going to get in somewhere in between the $8 to maybe even $12 million range, depending on the situation. Lots to happen here in Atlanta. But you're right. It definitely starts with Jeff Teague and Al Horford.
So where do the cornerstone pieces fit for the Atlanta Hawks, Shaw? Because as you said, Al Horford, he's been a pillar for this basketball team. He's seen this team make plenty of playoff runs. He played with the Joe Johnson era, and now he's played in this era of basketball. I call it kind of the Ferry era, even though Danny Ferry no longer is a part of this organization. He is responsible for this team as it's been constructed and what Budenholzer has had to work with. Do you see the Atlanta Hawks maintaining the combination of Millsap and Horford? It's not that I don't think that they shouldn't. I just don't know, given the way that the NBA is trending or the way that teams in the Eastern Conference are trending, that this dynamic duo has enough of what it takes to eclipse a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers and teams that are being built like the Cavaliers.
You're right, and we're looking at it from an outsider's point, as an analyst point, and maybe even to some degree as some fandom, where you're just kind of tired of seeing them do the exact same thing. Yes, they made the playoffs for whatever it is now, 8 straight years or 7 straight years, something to that effect. They're always somewhere. Last year obviously they were a higher seed, but traditionally they're in that 4 to 6ish range. Traditionally, outside of last year, and that just gets tiresome to see at some point for an organization. But I don't think they're committed to doing anything drastically different from this season and seasons past. I think they're definitely going to go after Al Horford and make sure they retain his services. Horford seems like a guy who wants to stay there in Atlanta as well, although he will explore and he will have suitors out there. But I think this team is almost assured to come back pretty much in the exact same form. The interesting question, I think, more so than even Horford in terms of whether or not he'll be back, because I think he probably will, but again, as I just said, Bazemore, does he come back? And then how do they get help on the wing? We talked about this at the beginning of the year. DeMarre Carroll leaving them was massive, and Bazemore really did well in that 2-3 wings position for them this season, being able to defend and really finding his offense better than he has at any point in his career. But does he come back? And if not, who do they get to replace him outside on the wings?
You're tuned to The Baseline. Khalid, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, our segment of The Drop, as the Atlanta Hawks season goes out very harshly due to the Cleveland Cavaliers trouncing of them. However, there could be still some sunshine on the horizon. And as we look into this offseason, Sean, maybe put a cap on what's going to take place here. Where do you go if you're the Atlanta Hawks? Now, much of the emphasis has always been that if you're Budenholzer, if you're management, that you should be trying to figure out a way to attract free agents to help bolster this roster. But it seems like with Budenholzer, he does an excellent job kind of taking lost pieces from other teams and kind of helping them find their game. We've seen this with DeMarre Carroll, and we're seeing this with Kent Bazemore. And unfortunately, it's at the worst possible time because like DeMarre Carroll, he could wind up playing for a team like the Toronto Raptors, or who knows what might happen with Bazemore, which then lends the big question. Should the Atlanta Hawks really fixate or focus their attention on what should be available in this upcoming draft, or do they continue to figure out a way to sample size what they've been doing in the free agency market?
They have a lot of confidence in Coach Bud as well. They should. And I think that's a great point where he's come from the Spurs system where they can kind of plug and play parts. They get guys to overachieve, if you will, or become better than you would have thought that they should be. And then now they're better overall for the experience of playing within that organization. I think they rely on that some, but there's got to be an emphasis on trying to get a top level wing out there. They need some shot blocking as well in the interior. It's difficult, especially if you re-sign Horford. Then that core of Horford and Millsap is going to be there. And Millsap is a very underrated shot blocker as it is. But they need to be able to bring in somebody, a backup big who can really kind of score from the post in addition to the wings that they need some help with. Again, let's look back at this season in general. Kyle Korver did not have anywhere near the same success as he did a year ago being an all-star. Is he down? Is he finally on the downside of his career now where he's not going to be able to contribute at a high level, especially shooting the three ball from deep? They're going to need that shooting. Do they trust Tim Hardaway Jr. to develop enough where he can step into that role? And I just don't think that they do. So I think they're going to definitely search the free agent market. May look at trades. Maybe if they trade Jeff Teague, maybe that nets them somebody else back. Remember that conversation earlier in the season when they were talking about trading Teague, it was to the Utah Jazz for Alec Burks. And he's an exciting wing who can also give you some playmaking from that 2 and 3 guard position as well too. So I'd look for the Atlanta Hawks to do something drastic in terms of making a move in free agency, trying to trade somebody for Jeff Teague in order to get some help there. But they can't stand pat and just rely on Coach Bud to continue to develop these loose pieces that continue to come in.
All right, another season for the Atlanta Hawks in the books. They make their run. They find themselves running into the buzzsaw that is the Cleveland Cavaliers. But make no mistake about it, this Atlanta Hawks team is still going to be a formidable basketball team. They're still going to be playing in one of the toughest divisions come next year. And this offseason will be a very, very interesting offseason as there's some pieces that could possibly be movable pillars that may change the face and the direction of where the Hawks will be for the 2016-2017 season. But nonetheless, we must bid a bond farewell to the Atlanta Hawks and in the immortal words of Velveeta. Go on, get! You're tuned to The Baseline. Kyle Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Drop. Coast to coast. Time now to go coast to coast discussing the news of the association. You ready to rock and roll, Mr. Shaw?
Absolutely, man. Let's ride.
I actually thought you were going to say in the immortal words of Velveeta.
I'm out of here.
All right, man. Listen, was there any shadow of a doubt regarding Steph Curry being named the MVP? Probably not. But I think what is most impressive is that he is the first player in NBA history to be dubbed unanimously as the MVP of the league. Well-deserved, Shaw. And hey, man, I'll let you take the floor on this, but what more can we say about the performance of Steph Curry the other night and really what he has shown us in these last 2 seasons in the NBA?
I mean, I think that goes to kind of a testament to even where we have Curry's MVP, even here on our show, where it's kind of coast to coast, almost as a passing topic, because we all knew this was going to happen, and Steph Curry is obviously very deserving. I think the caveat that you just mentioned, being the first unanimous MVP in the NBA's history, is definitely a feather in his cap. But who else could you have potentially even thought about voting for this season with what he was able to do from 3, what he was able to get his team to do, in terms of getting to the 73 wins, and now even what he's doing, although the vote's already in, we're currently in the playoffs. Steph Curry hands down the MVP back-to-back, and very, very happy for what he's been able to do and his accomplishments this season. And I'm scared because it really just might be the tip of the iceberg for this guy. He actually could probably still get better, cutting down some of his turnovers and just being even more efficient than he already is as a shooter. Yeah, Steph Curry to me is just a phenomenal basketball player, and he is easily going to supplant himself if he continues to trend in this direction as being probably a top 15, top 10 player in NBA history, just simply because of the way that he is efficiently going about doing the things that he is doing. Listen, the performance that he put on against the Portland Trailblazers, and not to say that the Portland Trailblazers are like the Bulls of 95, 96 or whatever, but the Portland Trailblazers being as they are, the fight in them and the exciting basketball that's being played in this series between these two teams. What Steph Curry did the other night, to me, I just personally felt like Kia should have just drove the damn car in the middle of, after overtime and just handed the damn trophy right then and there, just to supplant why he is so important, not just to the Golden State Warriors, but to the NBA altogether. Out in San Antonio, R.C. Buford, tout that horn, man, executive of the year. And listen, it's hard to argue with what this man was able to do with this San Antonio Spurs team and what they were able to achieve, albeit you could easily make the argument that the Warriors should sweep all awards. I think it's a great, great deserving award what R.C. Buford has done for the Spurs organization. Again, a testament to the greatness of the San Antonio Spurs. Well, this is an award, if I'm correct, that I think the other executives actually vote on. And so he didn't vote for himself. He voted for Neil O'Shea from the Portland Trailblazers and what he was able to do. Right. And but it's funny, again, you can obviously make the argument that the Portland Trailblazers did a great job. And I think a lot of that needs to go to O'Shea and Stotts. But not to take anything away from Buford, who's a multiple award winner in this category as well. The San Antonio Spurs obviously getting LaMarcus Aldridge and amassing the amount of wins that they did, the highest in their franchise's history as well. That definitely deserves credit. Golden State really kind of came back as is, if you will, minor subtractions and additions, if you will. But San Antonio integrated LaMarcus Aldridge and then basically downplayed the role of Tim Duncan, really issuing a changing of the guard, if you will. And that's a lot of the credit to R.C. Buford and obviously Coach Popovich for what they were able to do this season.
It's just remarkable, the system that they have in place, and I believe that they do have a system in the way that they go about the free agents that are available, how he was able to get David West to take less money and be able to come at the veteran minimum salary. I mean, I know part of that was his decision to do that, but clearly he showed him what this Spurs team is capable of. And listen, David West could easily be in that conversation about playing, one step closer to an NBA championship, something that I'm sure that he probably would not have seen achieved with the Indiana Pacers last year, wherever other team he would have chosen to go if it was strictly about the moolah. All right, out in Washington and in Charlotte, interesting developments. John Wall, Kemba Walker both had off-season surgery, but both are expected to make their recoveries by the time that the 2016-2017 NBA season starts. But how significant are these off-season surgeries for two of the premier guards in the NBA?
Well, it's huge, especially for both of those guys who rely heavily on their speed and agility and their lateral movement in general. So definitely hope that these are some minor procedures that they have plenty of time to recover back from. Kemba was obviously playing in the playoffs here, and didn't realize that he had something bothering with his patellar, I think it was, that was slowing him down a little bit. So considering he did what he did first with Miami Heat, almost willing the Charlotte Hornets into the second round of the playoffs, even more kudos to him. And obviously Dwayne Wade gave him his props as well too for being the next coming of the guards, if you will, as an elite point guard in the NBA, not even the Eastern Conference. And John Wall, we already knew he was banged up, and he shut it down before the season ended. So the fact that he had surgery on both knees is a little concerning, especially when you couple that with Bradley Beal being banged up, and not being able to play minutes for the rest of his career, as they're saying. That's more concerning to me than it is for Kemba. But hopefully, like you said, both these guys will be back at the start of the season and be raring to go.
Rest and recuperation. And if nothing else, man, they need to take a page from out of Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors and how they handled Steph Curry. These guys are important cogs in whatever they're building for their respective teams. And sometimes, man, they got to just understand they have to take a step back and, for the longevity of their game and what they bring to the table. Maybe it's better to not try and push through certain things just simply because you want to be out there on that basketball court. So, credit to guys like Steph Curry who, continually are doing the right things because they are making the game exciting. And John Wall and Kemba Walker are nothing short of those two. Finally, Shaw, out in Philadelphia, there's got to be some kind of positive news happening for the 76ers. The fact that they're not in the news is actually a good thing. Let's thank Sam Bradford and the Philadelphia Eagles for all of that. But Joel Embiid and Jahlil Okafor are guys have been sidelined with serious injuries. Embiid for 2 years straight has been sidelined injuries, but he's been doing some on-court work. And Jahlil Okafor apparently is a few weeks away from being able to start on-court activities. How important is this going to be for the 76ers moving forward into this upcoming season?
It's a massive for both of these guys, whether Philadelphia decides to keep both of them, trade one of them one way or the other. They need to be healthy so that the Sixers can go ahead and make a decision on their future and the team's future as a whole. They also have Dario Saric coming over next year from overseas. So they're going to have plenty bigs, and obviously when you include Nerlens Noel as well. Lots to decide between that core group of four players, and I can't imagine that they'll keep all of them. So they need healthy bodies so they can truly evaluate who they want to keep, who would teams even be interested in acquiring, if so. And hopefully both of these guys can get past these injuries and move forward, especially in the case of Embiid. I don't know if there was any word about him coming into Summer League, but hope to see him out there this summer in Las Vegas.
Listen, I'm really intrigued with what the Philadelphia 76ers are planning to do or what they want to do. Now that Colangelo is in the mix, D'Antoni's in the mix, and Brown is in the mix as well too, and how they plan to utilize, or if not, what they're planning to do with one or both of these pieces, man. So, let's keep our eye on what's going to take place for the Philadelphia 76ers in this offseason, especially during the summer league, because I really think that a lot of shakeup is going to be taking place in that Atlantic division, and they're going to be right in the center of it. Shaw, what an awesome show that we have had this week, man. Just a phenomenal work. And our guest, Cassidy Hubbarth, I mean, what more can we say, man? That is why she is doing her thing lovely on ESPN, brother.
Yeah, we're very blessed to have her on the show, and hopefully she'll join us again as a guest. This was a great overall show for us, covering everything in the NBA, from the playoffs to, you know, people out of the playoffs, and obviously some of the things happening in the coaching carousel of the NBA, the coaching savagery, as we like to call it. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And as always, I'll let my man CL sign us off. But again, I appreciate you guys coming in and checking us out this week.
No doubt, man. So for the baseline, Kylie, Warren Shaw, and Velveeta, we'd like to thank you guys for tuning in, and we can't wait to catch up with you next time.